You ever notice how the loudest people in the room are usually the weakest? They react fast. They talk too much. They try to prove everything. They burn energy trying to be seen, trying to be heard, trying to matter. But the person you should be watching is the one who says nothing. The one who sits back, observes, listens, studies. The one who doesn't rush to respond, doesn't chase validation, doesn't panic when things go wrong. Because that person is dangerous. And not in the way people think. Not loud. Not aggressive. Not chaotic. Cold. Calm. Controlled. That's power. If you want to move differently in this world, if you want people to respect you without you begging for it, if you want to stop feeling overwhelmed, emotional, reactive, and start becoming someone nobody can shake, then you need to learn how to become cold, calm, and dangerous. Not heartless. Not toxic. But disciplined. Focused. Unshakable. Because right now, most people are controlled by everything around them. Someone disrespects them, they react. Something goes wrong, they panic. Someone ignores them, they feel insecure. Their emotions are like open doors. Anyone can walk in and take control. But the moment you learn to control yourself, everything changes. You stop reacting. You start choosing. And that's where real power begins. Before we go deeper, if you're someone who wants to build that kind of mindset, that kind of control, that kind of quiet strength, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because this is where we break weak habits and build unshakable minds. Now listen carefully. Being cold doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't let your feelings control you. There's a difference. Weak people feel everything and act on it instantly. Strong people feel everything and decide what deserves a reaction. That's cold. That's control. Imagine someone tries to provoke you. Hold you? You react immediately. You defend yourself. You argue. You raise your voice. But the new version of you, you look at them. You understand what they're trying to do. And you choose silence. Not because you're weak, but because you're in control. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is power. When you stop reacting, people don't know how to deal with you anymore. They expect noise. They expect emotion. They expect drama. And when you give them none, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is dangerous. Now let's talk about calm. Because being calm in chaos is one of the rarest traits you can develop. Anyone can stay calm when things are easy. But when pressure hits, when things go wrong, when emotions are high, that's when people reveal who they really are. Most people break. They rush decisions. They let fear take over. They lose control. But the calm person? They slow down. They breathe. They think. And because they think clearly, they move correctly. Calmness is not weakness. Calmness is mastery. It means your mind is stronger than your environment. It means no situation owns you. And when people see that you don't panic, that you don't fold under pressure, they start to respect you without you saying a word. Because deep down, everyone knows. The calm one is the one in control. Now let's talk about the most misunderstood part. Dangerous. Not violent. Not reckless. Not destructive. Dangerous means capable. It means you're not someone to be played with. It means you have discipline, intelligence, and awareness. It means you know what you're capable of, but you don't need to show it. Because true power doesn't need to announce itself. Think about it. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest. It's the one who understands everything, but says little. The one who can act, but chooses when. The one who doesn't need attention, because they already know their value. That's who you need to become. And it starts with something simple. Stop reacting to everything. Not every message deserves a reply. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every situation deserves your energy. Your energy is your currency. And right now, most people are broke, because they spend it on everything. Gossip. Drama. Arguments. distractions. If you want to become cold, calm, and dangerous, you need to become selective. Selective with your time. Selective with your words. Selective with your emotions. Because once people realize they can't easily access you, can't easily provoke you, can't easily read you, you become powerful. And here's something most people won't tell you. When you change like this, people will feel uncomfortable. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're distant. They'll say you're different. And they're right. Because you're no longer easy to control. You're no longer easy to manipulate. You're no longer predictable. And that scares people who are used to the old version of you. But that's the price of growth. You can't become stronger and stay the same. Now let's go deeper. If you truly want to develop this mindset, you need to master 3 things. Your thoughts. Your emotions. Your actions. First, your thoughts. Everything starts in your mind. If your thoughts are chaotic, your life will be chaotic. If your thoughts are weak, your actions will be weak. You need to start observing your mind. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every thought is true. Sometimes your mind will tell you to react, to panic, to overthink. And your job is to step back and say, "Not today." That's discipline. Second, your emotions. You don't suppress them. You understand them. You let them pass without controlling you. Anger comes. You feel it. But you don't act on it. Fear comes. You acknowledge it. But you don't let it stop you. That's emotional control. And third, your actions. This is where everything becomes real. Because it doesn't matter what you think or feel. What matters is what you do. Cold, calm, dangerous people move with intention. They don't rush. They don't act out of impulse. They act with purpose. Every move is calculated. Every word is measured. Every decision is deliberate. That's how you separate yourself from the average. Because average people react. Powerful people respond. Now picture yourself like this. You walk into a room. You don't need to speak loudly. You don't need to prove anything. Your presence is enough. People notice. Not because you're trying, but because you're different. Your energy is controlled. Your mind is focused. Your emotions are stable. That's what people respect. That's what people can't ignore. And the best part? You don't need anyone's approval. Because once you master yourself, you stop seeking validation. You stop chasing attention. You stop needing to be understood by everyone. You understand yourself. And that's enough. So from today, start practicing. Pause before reacting. Think before speaking. Stay calm under pressure. Protect your energy. And most importantly, build yourself in silence. Because the real transformation doesn't happen in public. It happens in private. When nobody is watching. When nobody is clapping. When it's just you and your discipline. That's where you become cold. That's where you become calm. That's where you become dangerous. If you made it this far, it means you're serious about changing your mindset and becoming stronger than you were yesterday. So don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel and stay connected, because this is just the beginning of who you're about to become. Now go out there and move differently. Before anything, understand this. Most people are not weak because life is hard. They are weak because they react to everything. Every insult pulls them. Every opinion shakes them. Every failure breaks them. Every delay frustrates them. They are emotionally accessible to the whole world. And that is why they are controlled by the world. But there is a different type of person. A person who does not flinch easily. A person who does not explain themselves unnecessarily. A person who does not leak emotions to every situation. A person who becomes cold in mind, calm in presence, and dangerous in execution. Not loud. Not emotional. Not predictable. Just still. Focused. And untouchable. Now listen carefully. Being cold does not mean being heartless. Being calm does not mean being passive. Being dangerous does not mean being violent. It means you are no longer available for manipulation. You stop reacting instantly. You start observing first. You think before you speak. And you move only when it benefits you. This is where your transformation begins. The moment you stop reacting to everything is the moment people start losing control over you. Because reaction is currency. Every time you react emotionally, you are paying attention. You are giving power. You are feeding the situation. But when you stay calm, you starve it. And what is starved eventually dies. Now imagine walking into every situation like nothing can pull you out of your center. Someone insults you and expects anger. You respond with silence. Someone tries to provoke you and expects chaos. You respond with a blank mind. Someone underestimates you and expects insecurity. You respond by improving in silence. That is the beginning of becoming dangerous. Because dangerous people are not the loudest. They are the least readable. Nobody knows what they are thinking. Nobody knows their next move. Nobody knows what triggers them anymore. Because they stopped showing triggers. Let me take you deeper. Most people live in emotional reaction loops. Something happens. They feel it immediately. They act immediately. They regret later. That is not a life. That is programming. Cold, calm individuals break that loop. Something happens. They pause. They observe. They interpret. Then they decide. That small gap between event and reaction is where power is built. And the longer you hold that gap, the stronger you become. Now there will be moments where your ego will fight this. Your ego will say respond now. Your ego will say defend yourself. Your ego will say prove them wrong immediately. But understand this. Immediate defense is emotional weakness disguised as strength. Real strength is control. You do not need to prove anything instantly. You do not need to respond to every attack. You do not need to correct every misunderstanding. Some things fix themselves when you stop feeding them attention. Now let's talk about calmness. Calm people are not calm because life is easy. They are calm because they train themselves not to escalate internally. Inside them, storms may appear. But they do not let the storm drive their actions. They learn to sit with discomfort. They learn to breathe inside pressure. They learn to think while everything feels loud. And over time, their nervous system stops panicking easily. This is training, not personality. And this is where you start separating yourself from ordinary people. Ordinary people need comfort to function. You start building the ability to function under discomfort. Ordinary people need validation to stay stable. You start building internal validation. Ordinary people need answers immediately. You start getting comfortable with not knowing everything instantly. That is how calmness becomes your default state. Now we enter the dangerous part. Dangerous does not mean aggressive. Dangerous means intentional. A dangerous person does not waste energy explaining their moves. They move quietly. They build quietly. They improve quietly. And when results appear, people are confused. Because they were not watching the process. They were watching nothing. And that nothing was strategy. You stop announcing your plans. You stop sharing your emotional state freely. You stop giving people early access to your intentions. Not because you are hiding, but because you are protecting your power. The more people know, the more they interfere. The more they interfere, the more your focus breaks. And focus is everything. Now listen to this closely. If you want to become cold, calm, and dangerous, you must stop treating every situation as personal. Not everything deserves emotion. Not everything deserves explanation. Not everything deserves response. Some things are just noise. And noise is ignored by powerful minds. You also must master silence. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is control. When you stop speaking too much, you start thinking more clearly. When you stop explaining too much, you start observing more deeply. When you stop reacting too fast, you start choosing better outcomes. Silence is where clarity grows. And clarity is where power begins. Because once you see things clearly, you stop being manipulated by appearances. Now imagine this shift in your life. You no longer chase approval. You no longer panic under pressure. You no longer get easily provoked. You no longer reveal everything about yourself. You move like someone who understands the game. And people will feel it before they understand it. They will feel your distance. They will feel your control. They will feel your unpredictability. And that alone changes how they treat you. Because humans adjust behavior based on perceived strength. Now I want you to understand something important. Becoming cold, calm, and dangerous is not about becoming someone else. It is about removing emotional leaks. Every unnecessary reaction is a leak. Every emotional outburst is a leak. Every need for validation is a leak. And once you close those leaks, your energy becomes concentrated. Focused energy becomes power. And power, when quiet, becomes intimidating. Not because you are trying to intimidate, but because people cannot read you anymore. Now, as you continue this transformation, you will notice something strange. People who used to control your emotions will start losing interest. Not because they stopped caring, but because they no longer get reactions from you. And without reactions, manipulation dies. This is where your freedom begins. And from here, you do not go back. If you want me to continue this into the deeper psychological training, emotional discipline systems, and real-world application of this mindset, tell me to continue. Now you are entering the part most people never reach. Because it is one thing to understand coldness, calmness, and control. It is another thing to live it when emotions are loud, pressure is high, and people are testing you. This is where transformation becomes real. Not in theory, but in behavior. Let's go deeper. The first thing you must master is emotional delay. Most people think emotional control means, don't feel anything. That is wrong. You will feel everything. The difference is you will not respond immediately. You will learn to sit with the feeling without obeying it. Someone disrespects you, and your body reacts instantly. Heat rises. Ego wants action. Words want to come out. But instead of reacting, you pause internally. You let the emotion exist without becoming it. Because emotion is temporary. Reaction is permanent. And once words leave your mouth, you cannot pull them back. This is where most people lose their power. They speak while emotionally infected. And then they regret when logic returns. But a cold, calm, dangerous mind does not speak from infection. It speaks from clarity. Now let's talk about pressure. Pressure reveals who you really are. When life is easy, anyone can look composed. But when things collapse, when people disappoint you, when plans fail, when money is tight, when expectations break, that is where control is tested. And in that moment, there are only two types of people. Those who break outwardly, and those who stabilize inwardly. You must become the second type. Because breaking outwardly solves nothing. It only multiplies chaos. But stabilizing inwardly gives you space to think. And thinking under pressure is power most people never develop. Now understand this carefully. Calm people are not slow. They are precise. They do not rush decisions. They do not panic speak. They do not move emotionally. They reduce noise internally so their decisions become sharper externally. This is why they appear different. While others are scattered, they are aligned. While others are loud, they are intentional. While others are reactive, they are strategic. Now let's go into something deeper. Control of perception. In life, people will always try to define you. They will assign labels. They will assume intentions. They will interpret your silence incorrectly. And if you are emotional, you will rush to correct them. But correction is not always necessary. Sometimes the strongest position is not explaining yourself. It is allowing time to reveal truth. Because truth does not need defense forever. It eventually exposes itself. And when it does, your silence becomes powerful evidence of self-control. Now let's talk about danger again. Real danger is not aggression. It is unpredictability. People fear what they cannot predict. If you react the same way every time, people learn you. If people learn you, they can manipulate you. But when you stay calm, when you don't overreact, when you don't show emotional patterns, you become unreadable. And unreadable people are uncontrollable. This is why silence becomes your shield. Not silence to hide weakness. Silence to remove access. You stop giving people unnecessary information about your emotional state. You stop over-explaining your decisions. You stop reacting to bait. And slowly, people realize something has changed. You are still there. But you are not accessible in the same way anymore. Now let's go into discipline. Because none of this works without discipline. Coldness without discipline becomes bitterness. Calmness without discipline becomes laziness. Danger without discipline becomes destruction. So discipline is the structure that holds everything together. You must train yourself in small moments. When you want to reply, instantly delay. When you want to argue, pause. When you want to prove a point, stay quiet. When you want to react emotionally, observe instead. These small choices reshape your identity. Because identity is not built in big moments. It is built in repeated reactions. Now I want you to understand something very clearly. You are not becoming someone who doesn't care. You are becoming someone who cares with control. You care about results, not drama. You care about progress, not opinions. You care about direction, not distraction. That is maturity most people never reach. Now let's talk about focus. Focus is the final weapon. Because a calm mind without focus is just peace. But a calm mind with focus becomes unstoppable. When your attention is no longer scattered, everything you do becomes stronger. You work with depth. You think with clarity. You move with intention. And while others are reacting to life, you are shaping it. Now imagine your life like this. People talk. You don't rush to respond. Problems appear. You don't panic. Delays happen. You adjust calmly. Disrespect happens. You don't explode. Instead, you observe patterns. And quietly you improve your position. This is where you start winning without noise. Now listen closely. The world does not respect emotional instability. It respects control. Even if people don't admit it, they adjust behavior around those who do not react easily. Because when you are calm, they lose leverage over you. And when they lose leverage, you gain freedom. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from emotional traps. Freedom from unnecessary conflict. Now as you continue this path, something will happen. You will start noticing who actually has self-control and who doesn't. You will see emotional reactions everywhere. In arguments. In relationships. In conversations. In decisions. And you will begin to naturally step back from chaos. Not because you feel superior, but because you no longer function in that frequency. And that separation is the beginning of real power. Now before I continue further into advanced mindset training and real-world execution of this cold, calm, dangerous identity, I can take it deeper into. Now we go into the part where most people either level up or break. Because staying calm when life is peaceful is easy. The real test is when people cross your boundaries. When someone lies to you. When someone disrespects you publicly. When someone tries to provoke you on purpose. When someone underestimates your value. This is where your new identity is proven. A reactive person explodes immediately. A controlled person observes first. A dangerous calm person does something different entirely. They do not rush to respond. They first understand the intention behind the action. Because not every attack deserves a reaction. Some attacks are emotional bait. Some are attention traps. Some are tests of your control. Some are distractions from your focus. And if you react to everything, you become predictable. And predictable people are easy to control. Now listen carefully. When someone disrespects you, your first instinct will always try to protect your ego. But ego protection is expensive. It costs energy. It costs clarity. It costs focus. And most of the time, it costs your position. Because emotional reactions often create bigger problems than the original issue. A cold, calm, dangerous mind does not respond to ego. It responds to outcome. Ask yourself in that moment, Will reacting improve my position or reduce it? If the answer is emotional satisfaction only, then it is not power. It is weakness disguised as expression. Now let's go deeper. There is something powerful called strategic silence. Strategic silence is not ignoring out of fear. It is choosing not to engage because engagement gives the other person access to your energy. When you stop feeding attention to chaos, chaos loses direction. People who want to provoke you depend on reaction, because your reaction confirms their control over your emotions. But when you give them nothing, not anger, not explanation, not defense, just calm presence, you remove their reward system. And humans do not continue behaviors that give no reward. This is psychological power. Now let's talk about betrayal. Because betrayal is where most people collapse emotionally. They start questioning everything. They overthink conversations. They replay memories. They lose sleep. They lose focus. But a controlled mind does not waste itself in emotional recycling. It extracts information instead of emotion. It asks, what did this reveal? What pattern did I miss? What do I adjust moving forward? That is it. No emotional spiral. No revenge obsession. No mental self-destruction. Because revenge thinking keeps you attached to the same person who betrayed you. And attachment is still control. You are not free if your mind is still tied to what hurt you. Now let's go into presence. Cold, calm, dangerous people do not try to look powerful. They become quiet enough that their presence speaks for them. They enter a room and do not rush to fill silence. They do not over-explain. They do not seek approval in conversations. They observe more than they speak. And because they are not emotionally loud, people start paying attention more carefully. Silence creates weight. And weight creates authority. Now here is something important. You do not become dangerous by attacking people. You become dangerous by no longer being easily influenced. When people realize you are not emotionally stirrable, they start treating you differently. They become more careful, more respectful, more indirect. Not because you demanded it, but because your behavior changed the rules of interaction. Now let's talk about focus again, because this is where most people fail silently. Even if you become calm, if your attention is scattered, your life stays unstable. You must protect your focus like your identity depends on it. Because it does. Every distraction is a leak in your progress. Every unnecessary conversation steals time. Every emotional argument drains energy. Every social noise reduces mental sharpness. And the calm, dangerous mind is extremely selective with attention. It does not respond to everything. It does not engage everything. It does not consume everything. It filters. Now imagine this level of control. You wake up and your mind is not immediately pulled into chaos. You do not check everything instantly. You do not react to messages emotionally. You do not jump into problems without thinking. Instead, you move with intention. That is mental authority. Now understand this deeply. Being cold is not about becoming emotionless. It is about emotional management. Being calm is not about doing nothing. It is about controlled response. Being dangerous is not about harming others. It is about being unshakable in direction. Now when you combine all three, cold mind, calm reaction, dangerous focus, you become someone who is no longer easily influenced by external chaos. And that is rare. Now let's go deeper into identity. Because everything we are talking about is not just behavior. It becomes identity through repetition. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you reinforce control. Every time you stay silent instead of arguing, you reinforce discipline. Every time you think before speaking, you reinforce power. And slowly, you stop trying to be calm. You become calm. You stop trying to be controlled. You become controlled. You stop trying to be dangerous. You become unpredictable in your strength. Now we move into a deeper level, where control stops being something you practice, and becomes something people feel around you without you saying a word. This is where emotional immunity is built. Because life will not stop testing you just because you decided to become calm. People will still provoke. Situations will still pressure you. Disrespect will still appear. Delays will still happen. Betrayals will still come. The difference now is not what happens. The difference is what happens inside you when it happens. A reactive mind is like a burning room. Everything turns into fire instantly. But a controlled mind is like a locked system. Information comes in. It gets processed. And only what is useful gets allowed to leave as action. Everything else is discarded. Now listen closely. One of the biggest secrets of emotional control is this. Not everything deserves meaning. Most people suffer because they assign meaning too quickly. Someone ignores them, and they think it is disrespect. Someone delays a reply, and they think it is rejection. Someone speaks harshly, and they think it is personal attack. But in reality, many things are just behavior, not strategy against you. A cold, calm mind does not rush to assign meaning. It waits. It observes patterns. Because time reveals intention more accurately than emotion ever will. Now let's talk about authority. Real authority is not loud. It is consistent. It is when your reactions do not change based on who is in front of you. You speak the same way to pressure. You stay the same under attention. You remain stable under confusion. That consistency creates trust in your presence. And people begin to adjust themselves around your stability. Because unstable people disturb systems. But stable people become reference points. Now here is something powerful. When you stop reacting emotionally, people start revealing themselves more clearly. Because they no longer need to manage your emotions. So they expose their intentions naturally. And this is where your awareness sharpens. You start seeing manipulation without being inside it. You start seeing patterns without being trapped in them. You start hearing what is not being said. That is emotional intelligence at a higher level. Now let's go deeper into silence again. Silence is not empty space. Silence is observation space. When you are silent, you are not doing nothing. You are collecting information. You are reading tone. You are studying behavior. You are detecting intention. And while others are busy reacting, you are understanding. That is why silent people often end up ahead. Because they are not wasting energy explaining themselves in every moment. Now let's talk about power under pressure. Pressure is not your enemy. Pressure is a filter. It removes weak reactions and exposes trained responses. When pressure hits, most people collapse into urgency. But a controlled mind slows internally even when everything outside is fast. That internal slowing is powerful. Because while others are rushing emotionally, you are calculating calmly. And calm calculation always beats emotional speed. Now here is where danger truly develops. Not in aggression, but in emotional independence. When you no longer need approval to stay stable. When you no longer need validation to feel secure. When you no longer need response to feel important. You become internally self-sufficient. And internally self-sufficient people are extremely hard to influence. Because influence requires emotional access. If no access is given, influence fails. Now let's talk about focus again, but at a deeper level. Focus is not just what you do. Focus is what you refuse. Every time you refuse distraction, you strengthen your identity. Every time you refuse unnecessary argument, you strengthen clarity. Every time you refuse emotional reaction, you strengthen control. And over time, your mind stops being pulled in multiple directions. It becomes linear, sharp, direct, purpose-driven. Now imagine this version of you. Someone provokes you and expects reaction. You do nothing emotionally. Someone underestimates you and expects insecurity. You improve silently. Someone tries to rush your decisions. You slow everything down. Someone tries to emotionally trap you. You step back and observe. Nothing sticks. Not because you are fighting everything, but because nothing is entering your emotional system unchecked anymore. Now this is where transformation becomes visible to others. People will start saying things like, You've changed. You're different now. You don't react like before. And that is not a compliment. That is recognition of lost access. Because the version of you they could once influence emotionally is gone. Now let's go even deeper into real-world application. In conversations, you no longer rush to respond just to fill silence. You speak when there is value, not pressure. In disagreements, you stop trying to win emotionally. You focus on outcome, or you disengage. In relationships, you stop over-explaining your intentions. You let consistency speak. In challenges, you stop panicking about timing. You trust execution over emotion. And slowly, your life becomes less reactive and more intentional. Now understand this clearly. Cold is not your personality. Calm is not your mood. Dangerous is not your behavior. They are all results of one thing: control over reaction. That is it. And once reaction is under control, everything else aligns naturally. Now we reach the final stage of this transformation. This is where it stops being something you try to do, and becomes the way you naturally exist. At this level, you are no longer practicing control. You are no longer reminding yourself to stay calm. You are no longer forcing silence or discipline. It becomes automatic. Because your mind has been trained through repetition to reject emotional chaos faster than it creates it. Now listen carefully. Most people think strength is shown in how loudly they respond. But real strength is shown in how little you need to respond at all. When you reach this stage, your reactions become rare. Not because you are disconnected from life, but because you are no longer emotionally hijacked by it. You begin to understand something very important. Not every situation deserves your energy. Not every person deserves your explanation. Not every problem deserves immediate attention. And this understanding saves you from unnecessary mental exhaustion. Now let's go deeper. At this level, your calm is no longer something you defend. It becomes your default state. Even when something unexpected happens, your system does not jump into panic. It processes first. This is what people don't see. They only see the stillness. They do not see the internal discipline that created it. Now here is something powerful about being cold, calm, and dangerous. You stop negotiating with emotional pressure. Most people negotiate with pressure every day. They feel uncomfortable and immediately react. They feel insulted and immediately respond. They feel rushed and immediately comply. They feel afraid and immediately change direction. But you start noticing something different inside yourself. You feel emotion. But you do not obey it instantly. And that gap is where your strength lives. Now let's talk about identity locking. At first, control feels like effort. You remind yourself to stay calm. You remind yourself not to react. You remind yourself to think before speaking. But after enough repetition, something shifts. You no longer remind yourself. You just are. And once behavior becomes identity, relapse becomes harder. Because you are no longer fighting habits. You are protecting who you have become. Now let's go into how this affects your life externally. People begin to misunderstand your silence. They assume distance is anger. They assume calmness is indifference. They assume control is arrogance. But you do not rush to correct assumptions anymore. Because correction is emotional participation. And you are no longer available for unnecessary emotional participation. You let time explain what you do not need to explain. Now understand this deeply. A calm person does not avoid conflict. They simply do not enter it emotionally. They enter it strategically or not at all. That is a huge difference. Because emotional conflict drains you. Strategic thinking solves things. Now let's go deeper into danger. Danger at this level is not visible aggression. It is self-control under disruption. It is the ability to stay aligned when others are chaotic. It is the ability to continue your direction while distractions are trying to pull you off course. It is the ability to not reveal your internal state just because someone tries to provoke it. This makes you difficult to read. And what people cannot read, they cannot easily influence. Now here is something very important. You will notice something strange as you grow in this state. You will start losing interest in unnecessary drama. Not because you are forcing yourself to, but because your mind becomes too structured for it. Chaos starts feeling uncomfortable, not exciting. And that is a major shift, because it means your nervous system is upgrading. Now let's talk about execution. Cold, calm, dangerous people are not just thinkers. They are doers without noise. They move without announcing. They build without validation. They improve without attention. They execute without emotional dependence. And because they are not distracted by emotional noise, their progress becomes consistent. Now imagine this. While others are reacting to opinions, you are building skills. While others are arguing online, you are improving your position. While others are explaining themselves, you are producing results. That is where real separation happens. Not in talk, in direction. Now let's bring everything together. Cold mind means, you do not let emotion control thought. Calm presence means, you do not let pressure control behavior. Dangerous focus means, you do not let distraction control direction. And when these three combine, something powerful happens. You become internally unshakable. Not because life stops being difficult, but because difficulty no longer controls your identity. Now the final truth you must understand is this. This transformation is not about becoming someone others fear. It is about becoming someone even your own impulses cannot control anymore. That is real mastery. When you are no longer reacting to everything inside you, or everything outside you, you are finally free. And in that freedom, your life becomes intentional. Not emotional. Not reactive. Intentional.